All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is an absolute game changer. We're looking at a dramatic, paradigm-altering shift in how enterprise IT leaders really need to view sovereign AI in 2026. Look, if your organization is navigating the crazy, high-stakes world of AI deployment, data residency, and compliance, well, the ground beneath your feet has fundamentally shifted over the last couple of years. What used to be rock-solid conventional wisdom is now basically a fast track to absolutely torching your IT budget.
For 2 solid years, the advice we all heard on sovereign AI went exactly like this. If you care about control, if you care about keeping your data strictly in-house, you self-host. And by doing that, you just sort of swallow the bitter pill and accept that you're running a visibly weaker model than the ones you could just grab via an API. It was a clear, totally accepted trade-off. But, as we'll see from the data today, that advice? Yeah, it's completely dead.
So, you're probably wondering what actually replaced it? Well, the answer to that question reveals a pretty uncomfortable new reality, and that goes for both the hardcore self-hosting purists and the managed AI hyperscaler camps. We are looking at a completely new landscape where the old rules of cost and capability have literally been turned upside down.
Okay, let's dive into this. Back in 2024, the basic assumption was that sovereign AI, which was essentially downloading open weights and running them on your own metal, was cheap, but it was weak. You saved a bunch of money, sure, but you definitely sacrificed performance. Now, the 2026 reality we're actually operating in today flips that entirely on its head. Today, sovereign AI is incredibly capable, but it is surprisingly expensive.
Section 1. The Hidden Self-Hosting Bill. Breaking down the real arithmetic.
When organizations decide to self-host to keep that sovereignty, they usually only budget for the most obvious line item, right? And they completely miss the financial iceberg lurking right beneath the surface. Let's just start by anchoring the financial reality with the massive GPU floor. A production deployment of any serious open model requires multiple H100 class GPUs. If you're looking at hyperscaler on-demand pricing, which usually runs, around $7 to $12 per GPU hour, an 8x H100 node will cost you north of 20 grand a month, and that's before you even factor in things like storage or data egress. And what's worse? The old assumption that GPUs just magically get cheaper over time hasn't held up at all. Average H100 on-demand pricing actually rose about 14% year over year in 2026, simply because demand came roaring back way faster than supply.
But honestly, the hardware floor isn't even the worst part. We've got to talk about this quiet killer known as the idle penalty. See, a dedicated GPU bills you for 720 hours a month, whether you're actively pushing tokens through it or it's just sitting there waiting for something to do. If your actual enterprise utilization is hovering between 5 and 10%, which, let's be real, is precisely where most internal tools and departmental experiments genuinely sit, your effective cost per token ends up being roughly an order of magnitude higher than a fully loaded system. Think about it. API providers pool their demand across thousands of customers to hit high utilization. When you self-host, you just can't do that.
And then, of course, there's the human cost. Somebody actually has to patch the inference server, they have to rotate the models, monitor the queues, and answer the pager at 3 a.m. when generation quality randomly drops after a simple driver update. API invoices don't charge you for those headaches. If you look at the European market, a senior DevOps or MLOps engineer in Germany runs 100,000 euros or more, fully loaded. Over in the US, you can easily double that. Even if you're only using a fraction of an engineer's time, you're tacking thousands onto your monthly bill that purely API-driven companies just don't have to worry about.
Which brings us to this hard truth. For most organizations, at most utilization levels, self-hosting is not cheaper than buying inference. It's actually frequently 2 to 5 times more expensive per useful token. Anyone out there selling you DIY self-hosting purely as a cost-saving play? Yeah, they simply haven't done the math.
Section 2. The Shrinking Capability Gap. The 2026 Open Model Reality.
Now, what's really interesting here is how much the playing field has leveled. In June of 2026, ZDI released GLM 5.2. This is a massive 753 billion parameter mixture of experts model, and they released it under a highly permissive MIT license. On complex agentic coding benchmarks like Terminal Bench 2.1, it scores an 81.0. That puts it well within striking distance of the proprietary flagship Claude Opus 4.8, which scores an 85.0. Think about that for a second. For the broad middle of enterprise workloads, stuff like summarization, extraction, RAG, and moderate horizon agents, an open model that you can run completely air-gapped is now trading serious blows with the absolute best proprietary models money can buy.
Of course, we need to be completely objective here. The frontier models definitely still maintain a clear lead where it matters most for highly autonomous work. On ultra-long horizon software engineering tasks, the gap widens right back out to double digits. If your specific workload demands multi-hour, highly complex agentic runs, the closed flagships still clearly win for sure. Pretending otherwise is just coping with reality. But for almost everything else, that gap is gone.
And this brings us to a massive turning point in the sovereign AI narrative. Because the open models are so incredibly capable now, the fundamental trade-off for CIOs has been entirely reframed. As the source material perfectly puts it, you no longer sacrifice quality for control, you only pay for it. You can have a world-class model running entirely on your own infrastructure, but it's absolutely going to cost you a premium in hardware and human capital.
Section 3. Control over cost. Redefining sovereignty.
So this begs a really logical question, right? If self-hosting isn't actually cheaper, but the models are indeed fantastic, why on earth are compliance-heavy organizations putting themselves through the pain of doing this at all? Well, it's because sovereignty was never genuinely about saving money. Sovereignty is a control argument. It is the absolute, uncompromising ability to say no to external dependencies and jurisdictions you don't choose. It means your regulator can come in and audit your deployment. It means a foreign export control decision can't suddenly flip a switch and turn off your production system overnight. And it means your highly sensitive engineering or customer data never ever crosses a border into a jurisdiction you haven't explicitly greenlit.
And trust me, this is not just some niche concern. Gartner estimates that European sovereign cloud infrastructure spending will hit a staggering $12.6 billion in 2026. That is an 83% jump in just a single year. That massive wave of capital, it isn't chasing cost savings, it's chasing compliance. Regulations like GDPR, the EU AI Act, and incredibly strict sector rules in finance, health, and defense have basically taken data residency from a nice-to-have preference and turned it into a rock-solid, hard procurement gate.
So, organizations are essentially facing three paths right now. First up, managed APIs. These give you the absolute best models, zero idle cost, zero operational burden, and data processing terms that keep most baseline regulators perfectly happy. Honestly, for most folks, this is the rational default. Second, we've got managed sovereignty. Think products like Mistral Forge. These platforms exist for one reason, because the full DIY route is so brutal. You get your data residency and a custom model without having to go out and hire an entire ML infrastructure team. The catch? You are tied to a specific vendor's ecosystem. And finally, the third path, DIY self-hosting. You get absolute total control, the whole shebang. But the downside is severe. Model churn is relentless. New models will make your older ones obsolete in literally months, and your deployment can silently degrade while your engineering costs just go through the roof.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, the hybrid routing solution. Route, don't choose.
Look, framing this whole decision as a rigid choice between managed platforms, self-hosting, or APIs is just a mistake. The architecture that actually solves this agonizing dilemma between cost and control is what we call the hybrid routing solution, or the Bifrost pattern. Here's how it elegantly tackles the problem. Step 1. You set up a local-first router that sits right in front of your applications, and its job is to classify every single incoming request. Step 2. 70 to 90% of your everyday traffic and absolutely all of the requests containing sensitive data are routed straight to your local, self-hosted open model. This is huge because it keeps your GPUs incredibly busy, entirely eliminating that quiet killer we talked about, the idle penalty. Step 3. Only the highly complex, long-horizon, high-stakes tasks, the ones that don't contain sensitive data, get routed out to a frontier API.
By structuring your AI architecture exactly this way, the math finally works in your favor. Because your local hardware stays busy catching the bulk of all those requests, it actually pays for itself. Meanwhile, your massive API bill shrinks drastically because you're only sending them the tasks that genuinely require that elite level of frontier intelligence. Organizations doing this intelligent routing are seeing 30 to 50% total inference savings compared to a pure all-API setup, and they're doing it while maintaining strict sovereignty over their most sensitive data.
So the crucial point is this. The capability tax on sovereignty has largely collapsed. For most of your workloads, you are no longer trading away quality. Whether you choose managed sovereignty platforms or DIY open weights, control is now simply a line item you can put a clear price on, rather than a bitter compromise you just have to swallow. The real key to success in 2026? It's to price it honestly. Use true utilization figures and do not forget to factor in that human cost.
Which leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question to ask yourselves as you map out your AI strategy. When you build your business case for sovereign AI, are you buying necessary insurance against very real regulatory and data risks, or are you simply buying an ideology? Honestly, both are legitimate reasons to spend money, but only one of them belongs in a strictly financial business case. Take a hard look at your true routing needs, do the honest math, and go build the hybrid system that actually serves your enterprise. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.